This right here might be the most underrated rifle in Warframe. It deals literally hundreds of millions of damage, melts every boss in the game, and it is less popular than the friggin' Dragoon. What? You guessed it, I'm talking about the Stahlta, and in this guide, I'm gonna show you why you wanna have one, and also how to build it to get these ridiculous damage numbers. Big shout out to all our generous channel members, and now, let's go. First of all, let's quickly talk about how you actually get the darn thing. The main blueprint can be acquired from the Jackal boss fight on Venus, so very early on, and then the components come from the Granum Void. To be more precise, the receiver comes from the C rotation in the normal Granum Void, the stock from the C rotation of the Exemplar Granum Void, and the barrel also from the C but in the Zenith Granum Void. All in all, nothing too crazy, but if you don't really feel the form of it, I can totally understand it. The components are also tradable between players. But now that you know how to get your greedy little fingers onto the Stahlta, let's talk about how the whole thing even works. And before we do that, I want to give a quick shout out to Moog, because his videos have been a great source of information for putting this guide right here together. So if you want to have even more Stahlta guides and build suggestions, then definitely go check him out later as well. As for the Stahlta itself, this one at base is just a fully automatic assault rifle. Nothing too special, however, it is not hit-scan like most other assault rifles, it shoots physical projectiles. The Stahlta comes not only with this primary fire mode, it also has an alt fire, and this one is really cool because it shoots a devastating projectile that first deals massive damage on impact and then explodes in an even stronger AoE. However, with this alt fire, there is quite a lot to unpack. First of all, the alt fire projectile itself, when it directly hits an enemy, then it will force proc an impact status effect. This can be nice on some builds because there is a mod called Internal Bleeding that turns impact status effects into slashes. However, in today's video I don't really want to explore this specific synergy, so I just wanted to mention it on the side. What is, in my opinion, much cooler though is that the AoE explosion of the alt fire has no line of sight checks. So literally you can fire this at a wall and everybody standing behind it will still be hit. That is super duper convenient. Now, let's also take a quick look at the stats. And for the base fire, this doesn't actually look all too crazy, right? 24% crit chance with 1.8 times multiplier is alright, but nothing crazy. Also 22% status chance isn't really anything to write home about. But what is pretty nice here is that the full auto mode of the Stahlta has 1.2 meters innate punch through. When it comes to the charge shot though, things are getting a little more interesting. With a massive 40% crit chance and a 3 times base multiplier, this is very strong. But there is a bug in the game where it shows the status chance of the alt fire to be 32%, but according to the wiki, the actual status chance is 50%. I personally don't really know what's going on here. Status chance in general is a bit difficult to test as well, but usually the wiki is right with those things, so hey, more status chance, not gonna complain. And as always, if you could leave a quick like for the video, that would be super nice, because it always helps me big time with the YouTube algorithm. So thank you so much for your support. But okay. Now that we know how the Stahlta works, there are 3 more specific upgrades that I quickly want to go over, because these upgrades are incredibly important when it comes to the Stahlta and how to squeeze as much damage out of it as possible. And the first one of these would be Primary Acuity. This mod is incredibly strong on the Stahlta. It gives you plus 350% crit chance on weak point hits, aka headshots or wherever the weak point of the enemy is, and then another plus 350% weak point damage. Downside here being that you can't mod multi-shot. This mod is incredibly important on the Stahlta because in most situations, you kinda wanna use it as a boss killer, as a weapon to quickly take out priority targets, and with Acuity, you get the most damage possible out of it. The crit chance bonus from Acuity is additive to other crit chance mods. However, the weak point damage that it mentions here isn't base damage or anything, but instead it is headshot multiplier. And the fun thing about it is that this headshot multiplier bonus stacks multiplicatively with the added headshot bonus from Primary Deadhead. This is why on most Stahlta builds, you want to put Acuity together with Deadhead to get devastating damage increases. And then the third upgrade that I want to mention here, and probably the most important one on the Stahlta, would be Galvanized Aptitude. Yeah, that's right, baby! We have another weapon with multiplicative gun CO. Now, when it comes to the condition overload mechanic where you gain more damage the more different status types are on the enemies, I have talked about this a lot in basically every second video, so I don't want to bore you all too much with it again. Just saying that because the Stahlta fires physical projectiles, both with its primary and with its secondary fire, both fire modes scale multiplicatively with galvanized aptitude. The primary fire with every projectile, and the alt fire with the projectile hit itself. However, the explosion that follows afterwards doesn't get any damage bonus from aptitude at all. Now, what does all of this mean? It means on the Stahlta you always want to have both base damage as well as galvanized aptitude present. Oh yeah, and just in case you want to have a lengthy full rant on this entire galvanized aptitude mechanic, then I already have a video on that on my second channel. I'm gonna put you the links in the cards. But now that we talked about all of that, let's finally get into the builds, and in today's video, I have two builds prepared for you. One is the quote-unquote boss killer build that is meant to quickly take out any type of priority targets, and then the second build is a little bit more experimental and focused on the alt fire AoE, but it is incredibly strong and a ton of fun to play. Let's though start out with the normal build, and just in case you were wondering, you do not need to play Harrow with it, just have it on him because he's a very good gun buffer, but in general, the boss builds quote-unquote, they work without any specific weapon Warframe interactions. Of course though, having a good weapon buffer makes it even stronger, goes without say. Now, what we have here on the weapon is of course what we mentioned previously. Primary Deadhead for the headshot multiplier, plus primary acuity for even more headshot multiplier and crit chance, in combination with galvanized aptitude. These three are basically set for every boss killer build. Then I added galvanized scope for even more crit chance. Given the fact that we're already aiming for the heads, I think this one is a pretty good synergy. But if you wanted to, you could also put even more base damage in here, maybe Serration, or literally anything else that you like. Then we have Vital Sense, of course, for the crit damage portion, followed by an element based on which enemy faction you're up against, and then a faction mod, also because it is multiplicative to everything else on this build here. Now, in the Excellence slot right here, I currently don't have the mod space to put anything in, but generally a good option would be Vigilante Supplies, not necessarily because the ammo economy is bad on the Stahlta, but because of the additional chance to enhance critical hits. And just in case you do not like faction damage, or you're up against a faction where there is no faction damage mod yet, for example the Parita factions or the Skuldra, then I have a second variant of this build, and this would be this right here, where we drop the faction damage mod and instead maybe use Roar as an infused ability. And what this one basically does is, it opens up this mod slot right here for literally whatever you like. You could go for Prime Cryo rounds to give you even more elemental damage if that is what you're looking for. Also here, you could go with Serration for even more base damage. Hammer Shot is actually also not the worst option here. Adding more critical damage can be nice, but I personally went for Bladed rounds because this has a higher critical damage bonus. It does require you to get an initial kill in the first place, but usually that's not too big of a deal. However, there is one big problem with all those boss killer builds here, and that is that a lot of the things here need to be stacked up first to give you the damage that you need to really quickly take out the boss. For example, Primary Deadhead needs 3 headshot kills before you even get the maximum damage. Bladed rounds as well needs a kill to first get going. A Galvanized Scope needs to stack up headshots to get the critical chance bonus, and then even more headshot kills for another crit chance bonus. You know, in some boss situations, it can get a bit hectic, and sometimes there aren't even minions present that you can take out to scale all of this up here. So what I also did is a third variation of this build. I called it Boss Convenience, which tries to eliminate as many of these requirements as possible. What we do here is, for the base damage, we go with Primary Bulwark. This one gives you up to 500% more base damage, so more base damage than Primary Deadhead. And the only requirement is that you have 1500 armor, so no stacking up here. Also, I dropped Galvanized Scope for Point Strike. This one also doesn't need to be scaled up. But again, we already get a ton of crit chance from Primary Acuity, so you might as well drop this for Serration or literally anything else. If the capacity allows it, that is. Then, as well in the top left slot, previously we had bladed rounds for more crit damage, now we drop that for hammer shot. Gives you less crit damage, but it is active constantly, so pretty nice for the bosses. And then, of course, the element, you would adjust it to whatever the boss is weak against. You could drop Hammer Shot or Point Strike for a faction damage mod. You know, it's always a little bit about mixing and matching for which faction you're up against and what you really need. Now, from all the boss builds that I've shown you so far, this one is probably the weakest because you lose the multiplicative headshot damage that you would get from Primary Deadhead, but this one is still gonna deal more than enough damage to get you through every big boss fight in the game. I use it myself in the Parita Rebellion Steel Path all the time because it's just super easy to use. You can just drop into the mission and play it like this. Oh yeah, and just in case you wanted some loadout suggestions for what you would play when you go up against the boss, Lich or whatever, then my personal favorite here is the Compressor or Compressor Prime. This is the best single target primer in the game. I use it, for example, with this example build right here. Inflicts tons and tons and tons of different status effects, so it matches perfectly the aptitude requirement that we have on the Stahlta. And then to get all the armor to stack up Primary Bulwark, what I usually go with is the mod Health Conversion, because this mod alone can give you 1350 armor, which combined with the base armor of your Warframe is usually going to be enough to max out Bulwark. Now, I can also show you the Compressor Prime in this simulation real quick. Apply tons of different status effects and boom, 3.7 million damage, 4.6 million damage, and that is just the fully automatic fire. That's not even the alt fire, that's not even Harrow buffs or anything, right? The Warframe right now doesn't contribute at all to this damage, it's just the weapon alone. If we want to use the alt fire, we can also do that. 95 million damage without any Warframe buffs whatsoever. But, ladies and gentle frames, I promised you an AoE-focused build, and an AoE-focused build you will get. Let's get into that. It's a bit more experimental, but I think it's a ton of fun. What we have right here is what I call the AoE build. On this one, we're actually not going to go for primary acuity because, you know, it's based on the AoE. We're not trying to get any direct hits, so all the weak point stuff here, we don't need that. That is, of course, also why we mod for Galvanized Chamber. We now do want to have multi-shot, and of course also Prime Firestorm to increase the AoE for our secondary fire from 7.2 meters to a whopping 10.37. Then we're going to go for a lot of crit, with Critical Delay giving us 200% crit chance, Vital Sense for the crit damage, Hammer Shot for status chance, we actually need that here, and more crit damage, and then tons of base damage with both Serration and Heavy Caliber, getting us to 330% base damage. And what's even better, the negative accuracy from Heavy Caliber makes it that the different projectiles that we shoot out spread a bit more because of the lower accuracy, giving us technically even a little bit more area of effect. Lastly, we're going to use Rifle Elementalist to increase our status damage, because with this build, we're actually opting for dealing damage over time, which I know sounds weird because we don't have a faction damage mod on it, and we also don't even have a DOT element, but this one works with a specific synergy. First of all, in the Arcane, we use Primary Debilitate. When an enemy has 10 stacks of a combined element, like for example Radiation on them, then if you deal an 11th Radiation status effect, you're instead gonna deal one of the two base elements, aka Heat or Electricity, to the enemy instead. This is how we're gonna get the elemental damage to deal damage over time. However, the crazy thing about Primary Debilitate is this. As we all know, faction damage like Bane of Grineer double dips on damage over time effects. And the crazy thing is with Primary Debilitate, if this one is the source of the DOT status effect, then this effect triple dips with Bane mods, or faction damage in general, and that means this one is applied to the power of 3 to the status effects that you get from Debilitate. The great thing about this is that the radial attack from the AoE of the Stahlta deals pure radiation and also has pretty high status chance. Remember, this figure here, according to the wiki, is lower than the actual status chance, and that means that those heat and electricity status effects that we're applying with Debilitate, those are gonna be ridiculously powerful. Now, the question would be, A, where do we get the faction damage from because we don't mod it onto the weapon? And B, this one only triggers if you have 10 radiation procs. The alt fire is not going to inflict that many radiation procs. So what exactly are we going to do? Well, this is why we have a specific synergy with the lovely Eleanor right here, because Nyx is literally the perfect Warframe to go with this. You could also use Oberon. Oberon's pretty good at that too. My personal preference though is Nyx. This right here is the build that I'm using, and what we're doing right here for the faction damage is we use Roar. That is universal faction damage, so we can use it against every type of enemy. And then the good thing about Nyx is that she has her third ability, Chaos, which will instantly give the maximum of 10 radiation procs to every enemy in its AoE. That is very great because it means the enemies have maximum radiation on them already, so when we then apply something with the alt fire, this is instantly going to trigger Debilitate and give us heat or electricity. The rest of the build here is nothing special, just a lot of ability strength to, get as much damage from Roar as possible. The only two important ones here would be Arcane Acceleration, giving more fire rate, aka more charge up speed to the Exceltra, that is very convenient, and Arcane Rage for even more base damage. Lastly, Nyx also has this beautiful passive right here that gives you up to 200% more crit chance to primary weapon. And with all of that combined, she is literally the perfect gunrunner for this build. Let me quickly show you what I mean. Activate Roar, give everybody 10 radiation, boom. And that is without any effects or without any stacks of anything. And now check out my top 10 primary weapons list right here for even more great guns. Another massive shout out to Niels V, Demon Lord Zell, Demon Emperor, Emperor Prime, Nos Linux Gaming, Turtlepeer, Underkanio 2, Skylar Bowser, Mihawki, Socrates the Almighty Rat, Leo Morizaki, Shadow Lockhart, Antares, Patrasator, Boomia1, Mr. Games Plays, Zave, Awindai, Zengen, Quax, Henrik5984, and all other generous channel members for your continuous support. We see each other hopefully in the next one, and until then, as always, good loot.